there is some people outside, like across, because there is like this land that is my aunt's. There is one, and then there's another one. Like I think they're going to build stuff, so I may kind of like pause if they ever look this way. But yeah, so I kind of wanted to also like really liking my hair color. I think that it turned out pretty cool. And I mean some lights like doesn't look like there's anything, so I'm already getting used to the idea of having my hair all natural. I really like dyeing it, but that is a lot of work, and also it's not really good for your hair. Bleaching. The toning is pretty okay, but like the bleaching, like that is kind of bad. But yeah, so continuing, I wanted to kind of. No, I think that I'm done with like what I was talking about before, at least for the time being. I think I got everything out of my system, and it was really good. I think that the thoughts they came back to me, and I'm pretty. Like they kind of like didn't really affect me, so sometimes all I have to do is talk about something. So I had a consultation, not a consultation, but like a session with my therapist. But her son got into like an accident, got into an accident, so she ended up not going. We ended up getting there, and she's going to be with him for a little longer. So I'm not going to have the sessions, for the foreseeable future, which is not bad because I've been pretty okay, and I was already having sessions like every other week. So like right now it's going to be less than that, but I'm fine. Like things are pretty stable, so I'm kind of like in a really good place for me to kind of take it easy. Basically, I've been involved with my writing, and as I mentioned before, like it's been very fulfilling. I've been feeling very accomplished, but also I've been able to kind of like put my thoughts, kind of like string words together to kind of like, that represent my thoughts. And as I said in the previous video, sometimes like sitting with something uncomfortable is kind of like the way to go, because through that you can kind of, the worst case scenario, as I mentioned before, I can kind of, become okay with it. Naturally, it's not ideal, but there are things outside of your control. So I'm kind of, I'm really looking forward to no longer caring. I think that is the way, but like I'm doing this in a way that isn't kind of like numbing myself, because that is not good. Like that's never really been good. That is the type of thing that, because you can't really pick and choose what you're numbing. So that ends up with you just being numbed to everything, And naturally, when you, for example, you're kind of like going through a depressive episode, at least in my experience, you already have some type of numbing that is very unhealthy, because it leads to you kind of like wanting to just give up, which is not ideal. It's not really what I want, and it's kind of like dangerous for me, because I want to live. I want to kind of continue existing, and having those thoughts like that is kind of like a slippery slope. So basically, I know I'm finding ways to cope, and finding different, because like I think that when you're talking about defense mechanisms, like a lot of them are very unhealthy, and they kind of like just lead to you being kind of like uncomfortable, for a prolonged period of time. So I'm looking for like mechanisms, maybe that's not the right word, but ways for me to cope, and I think that I'm really succeeding at that. As I mentioned before, I've been finding myself on a certain I've been finding myself kind of being able to process things much better, because, and I'm finding that like some things that used to kind of like really hurt me, they don't hurt anymore. So things that have to do with I don't know, like with my religious orientation, my gender, sexual orientation, my politics, my I don't know, demographic factors about me. Some of these things I remember them really bothering me. Comments made on that, people saying and doing things. I think people doing things still bothers me a lot, but like people saying things like that is, I'm doing much better. Like I'm not really as affected, and everything is kind of like working fine. I'm at a place where I can kind of like overlook certain things, and naturally, as I mentioned before, like I am going through a very good extended period of instability, and that makes things easier, for me to just kind of like, for me to process things. But I think that I'm developing a habit, you could say, which means that like I'm developing new better habits. I'm finding better coping mechanisms. So when I am unstable, like it's still going to be better. It's not going to be perfect as it is right now, but it is going to, it's going to be less of a burden, and I think it will be less risky, like to and then like go through those periods of time. But as I said, like I'm experiencing instability in a way that I haven't since forever, basically. I can't remember the last time that, I mean, there's been some moments here and there, but like usually they go away after a while. But like right now, I am at this point where I can kind of like just be myself, and you know, like that is ultimately what you know I want. I want to just exist without you know the burden, without unnecessary burdens, because we all have responsibilities, and from that, you know, there are certain burdens that come you know with it, and I can't undo what has already happened. I can undo what I have already done, but I can learn from those situations and make sure that I don't make the same mistakes in the future. And when I say mistake, I'm not talking about me doing something that is like morally wrong. You know, it's not talking about you know that. It's just like shortcomings that we have, and sometimes the way we process things is not ideal. But I think that I'm in a really good place mentally, where I'm processing things better than ever, and I am very much how do I put it? Things are coming and going, and they're not really dragging me, you know, around, because that's pretty much what happened before. I would go from like one extreme to the other, you know, from one uncomfortable situation to like one very hurtful situation, and I'll keep going back and forth, and that just led to me being unhappy, you know, and it was not helping with my health either. So it's good that right now I am in a place where I can kind of like see these things still, but kind of like make the best of it. You know, for example, the other day I kind of like noticed that I was very upset with some memory that I had from like way back in the day, and I was upset with like my response and with what happened. I was kind of you know frustrated with the way I handled the situation, and that kind of frustrated me. Like it was as if I was reliving the you know like those moments. But then what happened is that I thought of something worse, something that was even more bothersome. So I kind of like was like, no, let me go back to this situation, because you know this one compared to that is pretty much nothing. So you know that was good. I was happy that these comparisons are kind of like possible right now, because you know I think that in this going back and forth between these two situations, I ended up getting to a point where I didn't really care about either, because I kept going like, okay, this is not as bad as this is not as bad as this, and in the end I was just kind of okay. So I think that this is a strategy, you know, it's kind of like it's a, you know, I think it's a healthy coping mechanism. I don't think there's anything bad about it, you know, particularly because, you know, like every time I kind of like revisit one of these memories, it does feel like it is losing its potency, you know, it's losing its great, it's, you know, hold on me. So it's good for me to kind of like revisit these situations and getting to a point where like they don't bother me. And as I said, there are some things that are kind of like very one-sided. There are things that are, you know, in which there was like kind of back and forth between me and somebody else, but sometimes like it was just, you know, kind of like speaking, you know, somebody speaking and I not react, not engaging, or like I saying something and the other part is like not engaged, and those can be a little frustrating. But I don't know, I think I just been kind of like trying to maintain a level of balance in my life, and I'm succeeding. I think that's the big thing, because I've been trying to achieve balance for since forever. You know, I think since I got to a point where I was like in your early teenage years or your late, you know, like twin years, like that is since then I've been trying to find this ability, and I have failed a lot of the time because I wanted things like that is, you know, something, because I feel like as long as you want something, like there's room for disappointment, there's room for you to be frustrated. So there were things that I wanted to be, things I wanted to do, but those they were not my reality. They were not within like, you know, the scope of what was possible for me. And right now, like I look back and I'm totally fine with what didn't happen, with like the opportunities I had, you know, I couldn't, you know, get invested in. I remember, you know, when I was in my second year of high school, it would be the equivalent, you know, to like 11th grade. And there was like this school trip that I couldn't really get into, because you know, my parents didn't have the money to send me there, because they had already sent me to, this was like in April, and they had already sent me one in December, you know, slash January. So you know, like there was no resources for that, and I wasn't blaming my parents or anything. I was kind of like just sad that, you know, I couldn't, that, you know, like an opportunity was right there in front of me and I wouldn't be able to seize it. But you know, these days when I look back, that doesn't hurt anymore, you know, because this was kind of like very emblematic of, you know, the fact that I was not in full control of everything happening to me, that there were outside factors that they could change, you know, like the course of my life. And I think that I was in this point where I really needed control. I was still had this unbridled you know, trauma that was just going around messing me up, but I wasn't fully aware of what was happening. So like I couldn't really fix it yet. It took, like longer and that. But basically, that was a situation where I had to face the fact that, like, okay, I can't have everything I want. And it took me many more years until I finally accepted that. And by accepting, not only acknowledging that that was a fact, but accepting that there are things that are like outside of my control. And there's only so much I can do, because sometimes like opportunities are going to come up, and you basically are, like you have to have been prepared beforehand for that to happen. And you didn't know that that was going to happen, so there was no preparation in that regard. I will say that when it comes to money, a difference, like that happens from back then to right now. Oi.